Hello and welcome to the Kim Iverson Show. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. So here's a question. What exactly is going on with Elon Musk's latest baby mama drama? And more importantly, why should you care? Well, I have an answer, and fair warning, some of you are not going to like it, but hear me out. This isn't just about Elon. This is about something much bigger, a fundamental shift in our culture. And I'd argue it's far, far more dangerous, disruptive, and frankly dystopian than anything the woke trans movement has ever pushed. We're going to get into that later in tonight's show. Have you seen the U.S. aid protests? Suddenly, all across the country, people are taking to the streets. They're furious. But what exactly are they mad about? Well, if you ask them, they'll mumble something about Trump or Elon Musk or billionaires or fascism without actually defining what that means. But here's what's really happening. These people, whether they realize it or not, are defending the most corrupt, most destructive neocon influence operation in the world. The same U.S. aid that funds color revolutions, regime change, and global chaos. Funny how they used to be against all of that, right? Those liberals that are marching in the streets right now. Well, tonight we're going to be joined by Alex Rubinstein. He's an investigative journalist who's done extensive research into this operation. And then also in tonight's show, this is truly unbelievable. Europe is having an absolute meltdown over Russia-US peace talks. Peace? How dare we suggest something so offensive? EU leaders are furious. Why? Because they desperately want the war to continue. They don't want a deal. They don't want diplomacy. They want more destruction and more power because, according to them, the only way to achieve peace is by continuing the war. All of that and more is coming up tonight. But first, let me tell you about something that I've now used several times. It has been really, really, really convenient, and that is the Wellness Company's Medical Emergency Kit. This has been the best thing to have on hand. I take this with me when I travel. I've used it during the weekends or in the middle of the night when it's tough to get to a doctor. With the Wellness Company's Medical Emergency Kit, you can tackle serious health concerns to avoid hospitalization or until you can see a doctor. This compact blue case is your portable urgent care. It is stocked with ivermectin, Z-Pak, amoxicillin, and 6 other essential prescription medications right at your fingertips. You can literally order from your couch in minutes. The process is fully digital. It's very easy. I've gone through it. I've done it. I have my kit, and it's really, truly awesome. Their medical board created a guidebook that outlines common treatments for UTIs, strep throat, bacterial infections, respiratory illness, and more. And all it takes is filling out a digital intake form. And within 1 to 2 weeks, your kit arrives at your door. And I'll tell you, this is really awesome, particularly if you've got somebody like your husband or you. If you're the type that you hate going to doctors, whenever you get sick, you're like, it's fine. I'm not going to go to the doctor. I don't want to go. I don't want to take the time. I don't want to take the energy. Just get one of these kits, have it on hand. The next time you get an infection of some kind, like an ear infection, you're feeling under the weather or something, read through the kit and you're going to maybe find that you have on hand the medicines that you need to treat yourself without having to rush off because you're not going to go anyway. So this is a great thing to have on hand. And I've already used mine several times. It's really awesome. Don't let illness catch you off guard. Order your kit now by heading to twc.health/Kim. Use code Kim to save up to $45 off plus free shipping. So that is going to be like a 15% off. I think you're going to get quite a bit. So $45 plus free shipping is what you'll get. Take this with you when you travel. This also saved me when we went to Florida for Disney World, because we like to go to Disney World. When we went to Disney World, I brought this kit and I did get sick and I was able to use this and it was so great rather than trying to hunt down a doctor when I'm in a different state, yada, yada, yada. So once again, twc.health/Kim, use code Kim to get $45 off plus free shipping. So tomorrow, Marco Rubio and his envoys sit down with Russia's Lavrov and his team to begin the peace talks. And Europe is freaking out after being told they won't have a seat at the table. General Keith Kellogg, Trump's special envoy for Ukraine and Russia, said all of their concerns will be known and addressed as well. He says, I don't think it's reasonable and feasible to have everybody sitting at the table. We know how that can turn out, and that has been our point. He says it's keeping it clean and as fast as we can. Right. I mean, if you get all these Europeans to the table, I mean, look at how many leaders there are right now. They're convening in Paris. They've been convening in Paris, sitting around screaming about, oh my God, they're going to end the war. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? Imagine having all of these people at the table alongside the United States, alongside Zelensky, and then you've just got Russia, the one country, Russia. Now, Europe might look at that and say, well, that's the point. We want to have all of us against them so they understand the power and the might. But I mean, that's just for what? To continue the war, because that's what you guys are all saying. In fact, they've convened all of these. These are the leaders of Germany, the United Kingdom, Italy, Poland, Spain, the Netherlands, Denmark, and the EU. They all are meeting here in this picture at the Elysee Palace for talks on Europe's security quandary. They're saying, what are we going to do? The United States is no longer our biggest ally. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte was also there in that meeting. Ursula von der Leyen, she's right there in the front. And she says, I mean, get what she says. She says, today in Paris, we reaffirmed that Ukraine deserves peace through strength. Peace through strength. That means peace through war. Continued war. Does that make sense? We want peace, war. That's how we're going to get peace. She says, peace respectful of its independence, sovereignty, territorial integrity with strong security guarantees. Europe carries its full share of the military assistance to Ukraine. At the same time, we need a surge in defense in Europe. So again, just the irony of this, saying we need peace through strength, which means peace through war. We're going to beat you into submission. And then when you finally are beaten into submission, you'll be peaceful because you'll be too afraid of us. And that's what we're going to that's what we're doing. That's the whole point of peace through strength mentality, rather than actually, just like having peace talks, which is what the US and Russia want to have. So they're all just on full on freak out, meltdown mode. In fact, UK's Prime Minister Keir Starmer says he's prepared to send British young men, British troops to Ukraine to die in those fields. Watch this.
Good evening. I want to thank President Macron for convening us this evening. At stake is not just the future of Ukraine, it is an existential question for Europe as a whole, and therefore vital for Britain's national interest. This is a once-in-a-generation moment for the collective security of our continent. Only a lasting peace in Ukraine that safeguards its sovereignty will deter Putin from further aggression in the future. Now, recent statements by the US administration should not come as a surprise. President Trump has long expressed the wish for Europe to step up and meet the demands of its own security, that he wants to get a lasting peace agreement to end the war in Ukraine. So today's informal meeting of European leaders was a vital first step in responding to that challenge. On defence, it's clear the US is not going to leave NATO. But we Europeans will have to do more. The issue of burden sharing is not new, but it is now pressing. And Europeans will have to step up, both in terms of spending and the capabilities that we provide. On Ukraine, we're at the very early stage of the process. Europe must play its role. And I'm prepared to consider committing British forces on the ground, alongside others, if there is a lasting peace agreement. But there must be a US backstop, because a US security guarantee is the only way to effectively deter Russia from attacking Ukraine again. So I will go to Washington next week to meet President Trump and to discuss what we see as the key elements of a lasting peace. I spoke to President Zelensky on Friday and will do so again in coming days. And we envisage a further meeting with European colleagues when I return from the US. In this moment, we have to recognise the new era that we are in, not cling hopelessly to the comforts of the past. It's time for us to take responsibility for our security, for our continent. And I've been clear today, Britain will take a leading responsibility, as we always have, because Ukraine must have a secure future, Europe must have a secure future, Britain must have a secure future, and democratic values must prevail.
Okay, so he says the U.S. has said they're not going to leave NATO, but we still have to step up. You know, we have to pull our weight, and that's something Trump's been saying this whole time about NATO. I mean, really, he's tossed around leaving NATO, and then when he was in his first term, he started saying, "Well, we just really want all of these European nations to start stepping up. They need to spend more of their GDP on NATO. Can't rely on the United States. The U.S. is really the ones funding it," and he's right on that. But I just want to get out of NATO entirely. I don't see the reason why the United States, all the way on this side of the world, with an ocean between us, is in a security guarantee that says we will be there by contract for you if all hell breaks loose. No, that should be a choice. That should be a choice. We should decide whether or not we want to go to war each and every single time. It shouldn't be by contract. I don't know why that's even controversial, why people want to stay in NATO at all. People are saying, oh, no, we got to stay. We got to stand by our allies. That doesn't mean we're going to abandon our allies. We don't have this same contract with other countries that we would still absolutely go and show up for. I mean, look at Israel. We don't have any of these types of contracts with them. They've got a lot of blackmail on us. That's a little bit different for a security guarantee. But we don't need this in order to rush to the aid of our allies if they're truly an ally. And if we assess the situation and say, yeah, we got to be there to defend you. I just hate this idea of having NATO. But one thing that Keir Starmer brings up, and Ursula von der Leyen said something also really similar. She tweeted out today saying, just arrived in Paris for crucial talks. Europe's security is at a turning point. Yes, it's about Ukraine, but it's also about us. We need an urgency mindset. We need a surge in defense, and we need both of them now. And then you had Zelensky talking about Europe needs to create its own big army. Yeah, you guys should all do that for you without us. You should be doing that. Why are you not investing in your own defense? That's the way you remain a sovereign nation. You're a sovereign nation because you can protect yourself. You don't rely on somebody else to rush to your aid. That's why we're a sovereign nation. We can protect ourselves when we need to. If we need to, the United States can handle it. We can handle ourselves. We don't need anybody else showing up for us. So, I mean, of course, you want your allies. You need help. You need people showing up for you. I'm not saying that doesn't happen. Of course it does. But it shouldn't be something that is a guarantee. It should be something that's done on a case-by-case basis. And each nation shouldn't be reliant on another nation for things like security. In fact, if you're going to be a sovereign nation, you shouldn't be reliant on another nation for really anything. I mean, you can have trade deals, you can have agreements, you can have things that benefit and boost your country, but total reliance on other nations is how you get yourself into trouble. That's how Venezuela, for example, was a country that relied heavily on imports. They bought tons of imports in order to keep their country going. That became a disaster. Suddenly, when the United States decides to sanction the hell out of them, everything goes up and you just go way up in price. We saw this during COVID. We're way too reliant on China manufacturing. We have to start manufacturing here in the United States. It's a matter of national security and sovereignty. We have to do that in order to ensure that we're not beholden to some other nation or we're suddenly weak because we can't fend for ourselves. Having the ability to be, being sovereign requires you to have control over your resources and also have control over your sovereignty and your borders and your security. And that is something that Europe should be doing on their own. So yeah, get together, make your own army, step up to the plate, start defending yourselves. And they've been able to provide a lot for their citizens because they're not spending money on defense. And maybe if they're forced to step up on their own, they would actually start making peace with their neighbors rather than saying, oh, I can just pick all the fights. It's like the little brother in the schoolyard. I can just pick all the fights because I got a big older brother and he's huge. He's going to come over here and he's going to beat your ass. So I could just be a little bastard to everybody because I know my big brother's going to come and defend me. That's not a good mentality and it's not a good way to move forward in the world. So yeah, Europe should get together and make their own army. They should have their own security agreements. And we should also get out of NATO. This has been my big beef with Pete Hegseth over the last couple of weeks. A lot of people are loving Pete. They think he's great. They think that, anybody Trump puts in office is fantastic. And my big beef with Pete has been, the guy goes out there, he puts all of these fancy pictures up that are Instagram worthy pictures, making himself look really cool. And then he stands there and says, we need to strengthen NATO. It needs to be a more lethal force. We need to do, and he's guaranteeing that we're still going to be in NATO, that, shaking the hands of all the NATO allies saying, yeah, we're in NATO and we need to become more lethal. And he's taking all these fun shots of him doing all these exercises with the troops, and everybody's cheering him on, and they're saying, oh, look, this is what real leadership looks like. This is real leadership. This is what a Secretary of Defense should be doing. And no, that's not accurate, actually. And let me put it into perspective for you to understand why I think it's annoying what Pete's doing. I want him right now sitting behind a desk. He is the Secretary of Defense. This is a civilian position, and that civilian position is mostly over the budget, the defense budget, and they're also over the Defense Department policy. But these troops have commanders. The defense secretary is not a commander. They do not command any troops. They do not decide on any of that. The commander-in-chief is Trump, and then under the commander-in-chief are all the actual commanders of the various different regions that the U.S. has. Pete Hegseth is not one of them. He's a civilian. I respect the fact he used to be in the military, and that's great. He's an in shape guy. He likes to work out. I think everybody should do that. I worked out this morning. He works out. Everybody works. You should work out in the morning. But that isn't. I don't want these photo ops. I don't want these sitting around doing coffee and pull ups with the troops. Just like I don't want to see RFK Jr. now that he's Secretary of Health and Human Services. I don't want him going around shaking all the hands of the leaders at the WHO and saying, what we need is a stronger, more lethal WHO. We're here to really strengthen our partnership with the WHO. We're going to do whatever we can. And yeah, we want you to step up, all of you other countries, and pay a little bit more into the WHO so it's not mostly on the United States, because we're like the number one funder besides Bill Gates. But I don't want to see those photo ops. I don't want to see him going to the WHO saying we need a lethal, more strong WHO. I don't also want him going around to the labs in all of throughout the country and shaking all and hanging out, taking morning pictures, doing lab work, and saying, or going and having coffee with all the lab techs and saying, I'm here and boosting up morale of the lab technicians that are doing gain of function research. I want somebody who's going to cut the damn budget, who's going to go in there and say, you know what? We need to cut this Defense Department budget in half. That's what Trump is saying he wants to do. I am all for that. I cannot believe Trump actually said that. It's a wonderful thing to hear. So I want that. And I want a defense secretary that's going to go in there and say, yeah, we got a lot of waste in this place. And I'm going to make a new budget that shows we don't need the money that we have coming in. And so Congress could approve less money next time because we're not asking for more this time. But if you're going and you're making friends with everybody and you're having coffee, it's like Elon Musk. Imagine him going into the IRS and he's standing in the IRS and he's like taking pictures with all of the IRS personnel, having coffee, saying, I'm making the rounds, I'm getting to know everybody, I'm boosting morale at the IRS. Just put it into perspective. Once you start switching things around, you realize how ridiculous it is. And then you stop cheering it on and you say, wait a minute, I'm being gaslit into thinking that we need to what? Continue our partnerships in NATO, have a more lethal NATO. This is not what Trump ran on in 2016. Many of us like Trump for the fact that he was calling out NATO, questioning why are we in this? And then saying to the other countries, you should step up. This is really your deal. You guys should be doing this. That is something that we want. So that's what my beef with Pete Hegseth has to do with that. It's not about leader. Yes, I want the commanders to be working out with their troops, to be good and strong and boosting morale. That is their job. But I want that damn defense secretary to say, we don't need half of this, literally, because we're going to cut this. We're going to cut the budget down in half. That's what I would like to see. So Zelensky, so let's get back to this whole freak out that everybody's having. So the U.S. is going to have their peace talks with Russia. Europe is freaking out, saying they're going to send troops. Another thing that Keir Starmer said was the U.S. needs, and this is the problem. This is exactly what I'm talking about. He says the U.S. needs to give us a security guarantee to Ukraine. What is that? We want to know exactly what that U.S. security guarantee is. Well, why do we have to do the security guarantee? Why is it up to us? Why do we have to do it? No, you do it. It's your neck of the woods. We're way over here. We got other problems we need to solve on our side in the Americas. We've got to deal with Americas. We've got a lot of problems with our southern neighbors, a lot of cartels, a lot of drugs, a lot of human trafficking. We need those countries stable. That's a bigger security threat to the United States than Ukraine and Russia. So you deal with it. It's your problem. But instead, the Europeans are saying, no, we want security guarantees from the United States. Does that make sense to you? And then meanwhile, you've got our Secretary of Defense going over there shaking all the hands saying, yeah, we're strong, we're lethal, we're going to give you all of that. No, I don't want to. I just want to get out of Europe. Let the Europeans do Europe. If they get into trouble, if something happens, and let's say that their fears come to fruition, Ukraine is not the same because Ukraine is Russia. Ukraine was USSR. That is Russia's. That's Russia's. We don't have any business dealing with Ukraine. Now, people want to say, no, Ukraine is a sovereign country. It is not a sovereign country. You're not a sovereign country if you're a vassal state of either Russia or the United States. If Russia and the United States have complete control over your fate, you're not a sovereign nation. Somehow you have to build that up. So Zelensky, he's also incensed about this whole thing, which, way more rightfully so than European leaders. He says that he goes on and he talks to NBC, Meet the Press, and he says, if we're not at the negotiation, we're not going to accept any deal. Watch this.
The risk that Russia will occupy Europe is 100%.
If the United States pulls out of NATO,
Yes.
Russia will occupy Europe.
Yes, so not all the Europe. They will begin from those countries, as I said, who are big our friends, but small countries who've been in the USSR and the Soviet Union. They will begin, and we'll see what will be the answer. But Europe will not answer because they don't have. They will begin to defend itself. Each country defend itself, and at this moment. So Russia will get all the successes with all the territories they will want. I don't know, they will want 30% of Europe, 50, I don't know, nobody knows. But they will have this possibility.
Okay, so that was actually him saying that Russia is going to 100% invade Europe. We got these a little bit mixed up. Let's go ahead and play this. Zelensky saying, if we're not on the negotiation table, we're not going to accept the deal.
Thing that President Trump said this week. He did not say yes when he was asked if he sees Ukraine as an equal member in the peace process. He did say later that Ukraine would have a seat at the table. Have you been given any assurances that Ukraine will have an equal seat at the negotiating table?
So I will never accept any decisions between the United States and Russia about Ukraine. Never. And our people, never. And our adults and children and everybody. It can't be so. This is the war in Ukraine against us, and it's our human losses. And we are thankful for all the support, unity between USA, in USA, around Ukraine support, bipartisan unity, bipartisan support. We're thankful for all of this, but there is no any leader in the world who can really make a deal with Putin without us, about us.
I just think this is so sad. He's not wrong. I mean, it's Ukrainians who have died on the battlefield. The Ukrainians have lost their lives fighting this war. Now, they were used. They got baited into this with the US rather than us saying all along, make a deal. Russia's your neighbor. They're not going anywhere. And your borders aren't shifting. It's not like you're going to suddenly import yourself over to Western Europe and Ukraine is going to be sandwiched in between France and Spain or something. It's not going to happen. Russia's your neighbor. You have to make peace with your neighbor. This is going to be deadly. Rather than talking sense into Ukraine, the West egged them on and said, we've got your back. And Ukraine went into that thinking, okay, they're going to send troops. NATO's going to come and they're going to fight with us. And that didn't really happen. I mean, there might have been some special ops on the ground or whatever, but for the most part, we didn't send anybody over there to fight this war because Americans don't have any interest in it. Neither does Europe, really. So they baited them along. They strung them along. Whenever Zelensky would go on his tours to the West and to the United States, they give him standing ovations and treat him like he was a god. They treated him like, you're the best amongst us. You're the great leader. We are so thankful and proud of you. They made him feel included. It just kind of reminds me of the nerdy kid in school being duped into believing that they're somehow popular all of a sudden because their parent won the lottery or something. So everybody wants to be their best friend and go swim in their mansion's pool or something along those lines. I mean, and it was all fake. This is all just fake. And they duped Ukraine by giving them this backing. And even Europe, I mean, Europe might feign shock right now, like, oh, the United States is going to bail on you. Well, we're not bailing. We're here. We're having these talks. We don't want to bail on you. Yeah, Europe is talking tough like that. But the reality is they didn't send any troops either. They weren't willing to fight for Ukraine. I mean, Keir Starmer says he's going to send some British troops. It's all just talk. They're not going to do it. They weren't doing it. They're not going to do it. They're just trying to act like, because they know that Russia and the United States are going to come to a peace deal. And so what Europe wants to look like right now is they just want to look like they didn't turn their back on Ukraine, that this had nothing to do with them, that they would have continued to fight. But believe me, when the peace talks happen and the peace agreement is made, Europe will go along with it. They're not going to keep the war going. They'll be happy to end it. So this was just sad. I mean, overall, this was terrible for the Ukrainian people to just be played like this, to be made to believe that they're included in the group, but they're not in the group. They're a vassal state. They were controlled by Russia, and then they were controlled by the West, and they're going to go back to probably being controlled by Russia, as they probably should be, because they clearly can't stand on their own. They're not ready for it. They've got too much corruption in their own political system. They've got a lot of problems, and they're not ready to be a complete sovereign nation. They're too young. They're too new. And that is all the more reason why they shouldn't have gone into a war this early on in their country's history. They're only, 30 years old, if that, as a somewhat sovereign nation. They really should have just kept their allegiances for a while with Russia. I mean, quite frankly, them being their neighbor, that makes the most sense. But, this whole thing was just really sad. Ukraine needs to realize they're not yet a sovereign nation, if they ever really will be. They're just switching owners. That's all they're at right now. And this whole notion, achieving peace through war, beat your enemy into submission, and in that way they'll just have no choice but to obey you. I mean, that's just silly for the Europeans to even be talking like that. And why are they even talking like that when they know the United States is NATO and the bulk of NATO? And then they say, well, we also need to beef up our own military might. Yeah, you should, especially if you're going to be talking like a warmonger, especially if you're going to be warmongering and then signing us up for the war. So Europe should take care of Europe. If they want to keep battling it out and they want to antagonize Russia, let them. That's on them. But we should be out of there. We should be out of there. And got to give it to Trump. I mean, this is incredible. The fighting, the killing will stop, and you got to give it to Trump. Even with the Palestine, Israel, what's going on there, even with whatever it is he says, the killing has stopped, and that is significant. And the killing in Ukraine might stop very soon, and that is significant. So this guy is doing something that all of these other leaders didn't have the courage to do, or they were just too corrupt or too callous or too cruel to do it, and they just wanted to continue the fighting and throwing dead bodies. And Trump actually came along, and despite all the crap they say about the guy is ending the fighting. He's ending the killing, and that is extremely significant. Love to see that. He will go down in history, no matter what the outcome is. I think of, if Ukraine ultimately ends up being back under the purview of Russia, whatever happens to the Palestinians, which is a very horrible situation for them. But if the killing can stop, I think that is an extremely significant feat. And if Trump can't cut that military budget in half, like he says he wants to do, because he's Teflon Don and doesn't think that the deep state's going to try an assassination attempt number 3 on him. But wow, he is brave. The next thing I would love to see is him cut the CIA, and then we'll really see it. But really, let's hope that these peace talks go well and they go rapidly, and we end that war in Ukraine. All right. If you are watching on YouTube, we are shutting it down now. We are going Rumble exclusive from here on out. If you want to watch the full show and continue, go to KimIversonShow.com. That'll route you to where you need to be, where we will be Rumble exclusive. We've got a lot more coming up tonight. Plus, I will be reading off your live chat, comments, and questions later on in the show. So be sure to join us at KimIversonShow.com.